The peace treaty that created Hitler, the treaty that guaranteed World War II. Europe had just survived the deadliest war humanity had ever seen. More than 16 million people were dead. Entire cities had been reduced to ash. A generation of young men had vanished into the mud of the trenches. And in 1919, the leaders of the victorious powers gathered in Paris with one promise: never again. But behind the speeches about peace and justice, something darker was happening, because World War II didn't begin in 1939. It was signed into existence in 1919. Inside the glittering halls of the Paris Peace Conference, the future of the world was being decided by exhausted politicians, angry populations, and leaders hungry for revenge. France wanted protection from another invasion. Britain wanted Europe stable enough to trade again. America wanted a peaceful new world order. But all three agreed on one thing: Germany would pay dearly. The war had shattered Europe psychologically. France had watched entire towns disappear under German invasion. Britain had buried nearly an entire generation. Politicians feared that if Germany recovered too quickly, another war would come within decades. So instead of rebuilding Europe together, the victors focused on punishment. The result was the Treaty of Versailles. On paper, it was a peace agreement. In reality, many historians argue it was a ticking time bomb. Germany was forced to accept full blame for World War I through the infamous war guilt clause. To millions of Germans, this was more than humiliation. It was national disgrace. The country lost territory, colonies, industry, and military power almost overnight. Its army was reduced to barely 100,000 men. Tanks, submarines, and aircraft were banned. The Rhineland was demilitarized. And then came the reparations, an astronomical financial punishment designed to make Germany compensate the victors for the destruction of the war. But there was one enormous problem. Germany's economy was already collapsing. The treaty crippled Germany far beyond the battlefield. Germans who had already suffered starvation, blockade, and defeat now watched foreign powers dictate the future of their nation. Many felt betrayed not only by the Allies, but by their own politicians who signed the agreement. Veterans returned home to unemployment and humiliation. Workers faced shortages and rising prices. Political extremists marched openly in the streets. Communist uprisings terrified conservatives. Nationalists blamed Jews, liberals, socialists, and the democratic government itself for Germany's collapse. The fragile new democracy, the Weimar Republic, was born in chaos. Then the economy imploded completely. By 1923, Germany entered one of the worst hyperinflation crises in modern history. Savings became worthless overnight. Some people spent their life savings on a single meal. Workers were paid multiple times a day before prices rose again by evening. The middle class, once the backbone of stability, was financially annihilated. And in moments like this, people stop looking for compromise. They start looking for someone to blame. That is when dangerous men become powerful. One of them was a furious, failed artist and former soldier named Adolf Hitler. Hitler understood how to weaponize humiliation. Hitler didn't promise compromise. He promised revenge. Every speech attacked the treaty. Every rally exploited German anger. He told millions of desperate citizens that Germany had been stabbed in the back, robbed of pride, crushed by foreign powers, and betrayed by weak leaders. To millions of desperate Germans, that message felt like salvation. By the late 1920s, the anger created at Versailles had evolved into something far more dangerous, a population losing faith in democracy itself. Then came the final blow. In 1929, the global economy crashed with the Wall Street crash of 1929. American loans that had temporarily stabilized Germany vanished almost overnight. Factories closed, banks collapsed, millions became unemployed. Desperation spread across Germany like wildfire, and every crisis pointed people back to the same question: who did this to us? For extremists, the answer was easy. Adolf Hitler promised to tear apart the Treaty of Versailles, rebuild the military, restore German pride, and make the nation powerful again. What once sounded radical now sounded necessary to millions of suffering citizens. That was the terrifying irony of Versailles. The treaty meant to stop German militarism ended up fueling it. Every restriction became propaganda. Every punishment became political ammunition. Every humiliation strengthened extremist nationalism. Hitler transformed economic pain into political power with ruthless precision. By 1933, he became Chancellor of Germany. Democracy was dying legally from within, and Europe still underestimated him. Many British and French leaders believed Germany simply wanted fairer treatment. Some even sympathized with complaints about Versailles. Others were too weak, divided, or traumatized by World War I to confront another rising threat. So Hitler tested the system again and again. Hitler rebuilt the military in violation of the treaty. The Allies did nothing. He marched troops into the Rhineland. Still nothing. He absorbed Austria into Nazi Germany. Again, no response. Each victory taught Hitler the same lesson. Europe would not stop him. The post-war peace was collapsing in slow motion, and the world watched it happen. Then, on September 1st, 1939, German forces invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war. World War II had begun. But to many historians, this was not truly the beginning. It was the final explosion of pressures building for 20 years. The road to 1939 ran directly through Paris in 1919, through revenge politics, through humiliation disguised as peace, through leaders so focused on punishing yesterday's enemy that they failed to prevent tomorrow's catastrophe. Versailles did not cause World War II alone. Economic collapse, nationalism, anti-Semitism, political extremism, and failures of leadership all played massive roles. But the treaty poisoned Germany's political atmosphere and handed extremists the perfect narrative that democracy had failed, the nation had been betrayed, and only radical power could restore greatness. And that lesson still matters today. History repeatedly shows that humiliation rarely creates peace, because sometimes the most dangerous wars begin long before the first shot is fired. Sometimes they begin with signatures,